any further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our very first speaker of the day. And how better to start a HearthLight event than with a story of healing and hope, because he is a cancer survivor. He figured out how to create his own health and healing journey. And I got to see him play in the Harlem Legends Globetrotters basketball game last night. He's definitely healthy and feeling strong and outpaced a lot of the other guys that were trying to play last night, but don't tell them I said that. So give a warm round of applause. I know it's early in the morning, but hopefully everybody had their coffee. So let's give it up for Chris Wark. Come on out here, Chris.
We got Mike. Boom, boom. All right, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for coming out. First of all, thanks to Kim Hames and everybody, the wonderful people at HearthLight, QED, for putting this together. I mean, it's just always a thrill to be able to share my story, and I'm just so glad that you're here, and I'm going to give you all I got. So this might be a little hot. We might knock it down a notch or two. So how many people know my story? Sorry, the lights are really bright, so I'm going to try to figure out. Okay, awesome. And how many people have never heard me speak before, don't know who I am at all? No idea. Okay, good, great. So I'll tell you my story. In 2003, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. I was 26 years old. Now, stage 3 colon cancer at 26 is kind of weird, right? Because this is an old person's disease. Like, they don't even screen for colon cancer until you're 50. And I'm 26 and I've got colon cancer. Now, some of you thinking, well, how did you find out? I had abdominal pain and eventually had a colonoscopy, and there's a golf ball-sized tumor in my large intestine. They did a biopsy and they said, we're sorry, you've got colon cancer. So here I am, a 26-year-old kid, basically, with this sort of weird old people cancer, which was awesome for the ego. The next thing that happened was they said to me, this is really serious. Like, we got to get you into surgery right away. We got to get this thing out of you before it kills you. And so I was rushed into surgery. I was diagnosed 2 days before Christmas. They wanted to have me in surgery the next day. How many of you know what that's like, right? The cancer industry wants to rush you into treatment. So it's very common for them to have you in surgery or chemo within just a day or two of a diagnosis. I mean, your head's spinning. You have no idea what's happening to you, right? You're still trying to figure out, wait a minute, I have cancer? Like, what in the world, right? So I was in the same boat as many of you have been or maybe are in right now. And I was rushed into surgery. We ended up being able to postpone it a week, but that's still not very long to really think about your life and why you have cancer and like what's going on. So I had surgery. They took out a third of my large intestine. They took out the tumor. And when I woke up from surgery, they said, it's worse than we thought. We got everything we could find, but you're stage 3C, which means it's metastatic, and you're going to need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy. So at that point, I was like, really? Like, they told me, like, well, no, it's an easy procedure. We'll just do laparoscopic surgery. We take it out, routine, no big deal. You'll be fine. You can go back to your normal life. And now I woke up and they're like, oh, it's worse. We cut you open. Now you need chemo. And I was just had a hard time imagining myself as a chemo patient. And I'm not to disparage anyone here that's been through chemo. By the way, if you've been through chemo, it's okay. Just want you to know that. It's okay. It's not too late for you. So 2 things happened in the hospital that got my wheels turning a little bit. It got me thinking maybe there was something wrong with the system I was in. The first thing that happened was the first meal they served me. How many of you, if you know my story, you're not allowed to answer. If you don't know my story, would you like to guess what the first meal they served me was? Jill is a good guess. Fried chicken. What else we got? Somebody said potatoes, and then I heard a lot of, I don't know, I couldn't understand you. Okay, Nobody guessed it. The first meal they served me was a sloppy Joe. Yeah. Every time I tell this story, people are like, ah. The sloppy Joe is like the worst cafeteria food you can pretty much think of. It's so bad that they don't even serve it in restaurants. Right? You realize that, like, restaurants don't serve sloppy Joes. It's like that bad. Does anybody here like sloppy Joes, by the way? One person? I'm sorry. You should probably leave now. You're not going to like the rest of my talk. But yeah, they put this thing in front of me, right? I mean, this is like what they serve at like summer camp or like what they served the military in 1950, you know? And I'm just like, really? You know, why are they serving this to sick people? They just cut out a third of my colon, my large intestine. Have fun and enjoy digesting this. So I did eat some of it. I was really hungry. I hadn't eaten in a few days. And then the next thing that happened in the hospital was on the day I was supposed to go home, my surgeon came in and he said, he was just doing his final rounds. We were talking or whatever. And I asked him, I said, are there any foods I need to eat, or avoid or whatever? Because, I was just kind of worried. I didn't want to go home and like eat the wrong thing and screw it up. I mean, they had cut my digestive system, right, open and sectioned out of it and then stitched it back together, right? So I didn't want to like eat the wrong thing, like, can I eat, is hot sauce going to melt the stitches? What about Doritos? Are they too sharp? I don't know. And so he says, nah, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer. And that was it. That was the nutritional advice I got from my surgeon. So I went home, and some of you know my story, right? I used food to get well, and the two most important foods were sloppy joes and beer. And so I wrote this book, and it's called Sloppy Joes and Beer, and How to Heal Your Cancer with Sloppy Joes and Beer. It's in the back. I'm just kidding. So I get home from surgery, and I'm recovering on the couch, and thinking about my life, and I just had a hard time imagining myself as a chemo patient. It just seemed so strange to me. Like I could not picture myself doing that. And I just had this deep insecurity and also fear, of course, and internal conflict about doing it. Everyone was saying this is what I was supposed to do, but I didn't feel like it was right for me. I didn't know what else to do. And so my wife and I prayed. We're Christians, and we prayed, and I just said, God, if there's another way, just please show me, because I don't know what to do. Like, I'm desperate. And some of you know what that feels like. And so I just reached out, I asked for help, and 2 days later, a book shows up on my doorstep. And this book was sent to me from a man in Alaska who I've never met. It was a guy that knew my dad. And I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. He's in Alaska. My dad told him I was diagnosed with cancer, and he's like, well, I got to send him this book. So he sends me a book, and I open this package, and the book's called God's Way to Ultimate Health. Anybody know that book? A couple people? Somebody clapped for it? So I'm like, all right, God's Way to Ultimate Health, what's this about? So I start reading the book, and I realized right away that the man who wrote it, I learned, had watched his mother suffer and die through cancer treatment. I mean, the treatments killed his mom, according to him. And he had watched many of his church members suffer and die through conventional cancer treatment. He was a pastor. And then he was diagnosed with cancer in his 50s, colon cancer, same as me. And instead of doing conventional cancer treatment, which he was like, I don't want to do that. I mean, it's like everybody I know that's done that, it didn't work for him. He had a health nut buddy who said, you need to go back to the Garden of Eden. You need to eat a diet like the Garden of Eden. Raw fruits and vegetables, straight from the earth, organic, and you should also probably drink lots of carrot juice. So he's like, oh, what do I got to lose? I'll do that. A year later, his tumor was gone. His body healed. And as I'm reading his story, I'm like, wow, this is it. Like, this is exactly what I asked for. I prayed, this book showed up, this guy had colon cancer, he healed it with nutrition. This is like an amazing concept to me, and it makes sense to me. Because as a believer, the idea that God created the earth for us, and that everything we need comes from the earth, that's not a hard concept for me to believe. I think it's very easy to me, for me to believe that. So I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. And you know what? This guy's making this case in this book about the reason that we're all so sick is because we're eating a diet that's loaded with processed, man-made junk food, and we're eating way too much meat and dairy. And we've gotten away from this sort of simple diet of food from the earth. And so I'm like, this makes a lot of sense. And I called my wife, and I'm like, I got this book, and we got to get a juicer. I'm going to do this raw food diet. And I was really excited. And she was not excited. She was like, what are you talking about? And I'm trying to explain, like, trying to explain it. I didn't know what I was talking about. And she's like, okay, I guess, yeah, you're still doing chemo, right? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do the chemo. So as soon as I hang up the phone, the phone rings again. Because in my wife's family, if you tell one person something, they all know immediately, right? So family members are calling me saying, like, Chris, we heard you're thinking about not doing chemo, and I just want you to know, you really need to do what your doctor says. Right? Don't you think if there was something better, they would know about it? I know someone that did alternative, and they died. And I'm like, this isn't helpful. Like, I had all this confidence, right? I prayed, I got this book. Like, it seemed like an answer to prayer, and then everybody around me is like, no, it's not. Don't do that. So I had this new sort of unexpected wave of anxiety and stress because the people around me that I thought would support me were like kind of withdrawing their support. Does anybody know what that feels like? Yeah, it's really not fun, right? When you realize people are not supporting you. And I don't mean to fault them because they loved me. They just thought I was wrong, right? And they didn't want to support what they thought was a bad decision. I get that. But in the meantime, here I am all alone. Except for one person. I had one person in the beginning that supported me, and that was my mom. My mom had been a health nut forever and had all the books by Paul Bragg and Pablo Areola and like everything, right? She had the natural cures they don't want you to know about, right? She had stacks and stacks of just health books. She'd read them all and never threw a book away. So my mom was very comfortable with this idea of healing with nutrition. And as soon as I talked to her about it, she was like, oh yeah, no, I've got lots of books and I can help, I'll give you some books and stuff and whatever. And so I'm like, oh wow, my mom has this huge library of books that she's been saving up apparently for me, which is kind of a miracle, right? So overnight, I converted to a raw food diet. 100% all the way, I'm doing this. And let me just tell you something, 100% is easy. 99% is hard. You understand that? 100% is easy, but most of us are not willing to go 100%. But if you make that decision to commit 100% to do something, it's way easier than like, I'll try it, Do or do not. There is no try. That was Yoda. So I go 100% raw overnight. I went and like, who sells juicers, right? This was January 2004, okay? First of all, no one had heard of the raw food diet, okay? It was for weirdos, like really weirdos. I went to a raw food diet support group, and they were weird, okay? They were too weird for me. I was like, I don't know about these people. They were not cool. So I get on the raw food diet immediately, but I've got all this intense family pressure to like go see the oncologist. You know, they're saying things like, will you please just go hear what he has to say? You know, and you're really being hard-headed, and you're really being stubborn and selfish. I'm like, geez, all right, you know, okay, we'll go to the oncologist appointment. Maybe they have some alternative therapies available. So we go to the cancer clinic, and it's packed, right? It's packed out. The parking lot's full, the waiting room's full. You know, I walk in there, and kind of like the first day at camp or a new school, like I'm surveying the room, kind of checking it out, like, all right, I'm in the cancer club now. Who else is in this club? Like, any cool people in here? Right? And like looking around the room, no cool people. I had long hair, handlebar mustache. I was a musician, like a rock dude, you know. And everybody in there was 2 and 3 times my age. I was 26. Everybody in the clinic was 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I just thought, God, I don't belong here, you know? This is not the place for me. We're sitting on the couch waiting to go back. And you know how it is, doctor's office, you're going to wait a long time. That's why it's called the waiting room. You're going to wait. So the TV's on, and out comes Jack LaLanne on the TV in the cancer clinic. It was Good Morning America, one of those shows. And he comes out and he starts going off about nutrition. Like, this is why we're all so sick, because we're eating a bunch of processed food and man-made food. If man made it, don't eat it. And I'm like glued to the TV. I cannot believe it's on right now, because this guy's saying the same stuff that, you know, I read in this book, and it was like all starting to make sense to me. And I'm getting this sort of divine, you know, a beam, right, to me in the cancer clinic. And I turned to my wife and I was like, can you believe this is on right now? And she's like, yeah, it's pretty weird. And I'm like, this is weird. This is weird. And we go back to see the doctor eventually, and, you know, this guy just gives me the standard pitch. I mean, he's just like, you know, look, you're 26, you have metastatic colon cancer, it's very aggressive in young people, and you've got about a 60% chance of living 5 years. And I'm like, 60%, you know, like, I took statistics. What does that even mean? 60%, like, where did that number come from? And that's pretty close to 50%, which is like 50-50. Well, that's like a coin toss. So, I mean, what does that even mean? Like, that's not inspiring any confidence at all. And I asked him about the raw food diet, and he said, no, you can't do that. It'll fight the chemo. It'll fight the chemo. Do you know what that means? It means it's probably pretty good. Probably pretty good. I'd been on it for a week. We asked him if there were any alternative therapies available, and at that point, his demeanor changed dramatically. He became very arrogant, condescending, and he said, no, there are none. If you don't do chemotherapy, you're insane. And at that moment in the conversation, the fear really took over for me. And you know, when you're afraid, your body starts pumping stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, and those hormones interfere with your brain function. Not to mention, they suppress your immunity and promote inflammation. And so when you're stressed, you don't think clearly. You're very irrational and emotional and impulsive. And you kind of go into the, shock, right? So I'm in this fear, shock kind of moment, and he's just talking down to me and kind of, on a diatribe about why I have to do chemo and how important it is, and I'm going to die if I don't do it, and I've got a family to think about, my wife and stuff, just all this kind of stuff. And I was just kind of like, not really hearing what he was saying. Then all of a sudden, just kind of out of the blue, he says, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not telling you this because I need your business. And I was like, what? Wait a second. Wait 1 second. I was in sales for many years. And one of the things they taught me in sales was a technique called the push away. And this guy just did the push away on me. Nobody does the push away on me. And so I'm like, this is weird. Like, what is happening? Like, business? What does business have to do with anything? Oh, wait a second. This is a business. This is a business. This guy needs customers. I'm a customer here. Interesting. But at the same time, there was so much fear and anxiety that after our appointment, I got up like a robot and just walked to the desk and made an appointment to get a port put in to start chemotherapy. I walked in the clinic confident and I walked out terrified, right? And that's what they do in a lot of cancer centers, right? It's a fear factory. They use fear to motivate you, to manipulate your emotions, to convince you that you're going to die if you don't do what they say. And you're so afraid of dying that you're willing to do anything to not die, right? And so that means whatever brutal therapy you can give me, sure, yes, I just don't want to die, right? My wife and I walked out to her car and sat in her car and we just held hands and cried and, and just like choked through a prayer of just like desperation because my faith was completely shaken at that point. It was just completely shaken. I thought I had the answer, and then all of a sudden, everything around me is telling me, no, I don't. Like, I'm totally lost. Fortunately, though, I had a few weeks to think about my life and think about my next steps because I was still recovering from surgery. And in that time, I spent a lot of time praying and reading the Bible and thinking about my life and researching and reading other books about health and nutrition. And I realized that I had two paths before me. On one hand, there was the path that everyone was going down. It was the wide, paved, brightly lit road, right? And that road led to a beautiful, modern train station, state-of-the-art. Everybody is cheering you on. They're running little races for you, right? And you get on the chemo train and they got these really comfy chairs, right? And they even have like little snacks and stuff for you. And everybody's going that way because it looks so shiny and nice. But there's immediate suffering as soon as you get on the train, right? There's immediate suffering. And then once you get on that train, it's really hard to get off. And who knows where it goes? Am I going to be dead at the end of the line? Are they going to just drop me off somewhere? Like, I don't know. Like, it's scary. Like, I know everybody says you have to do it, but that's scary to me. I don't know about that. And then on the other hand, there's basically like a little path into the jungle that I have to hack my way through alone in the dark. The do not enter sign somebody posted. And that was scary too. Both options were scary. And courage is not the absence of fear. You understand that? It's not the absence of fear. Courage is taking action in spite of fear. One of my favorite quotes is Joyce Meyer, and it's, if you're scared, do it scared. If you're scared, do it scared. And I was scared. People tell me now, oh, you're so brave, you're so courageous. It didn't feel brave at all. Courage feels a lot like scared. Okay? Feels a lot like scared. So this appointment is creeping up, and every day that it gets closer, the anxiety is building, right? Because I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was so desperately wishing that there was like one obvious, easy choice, right? I wanted somebody to just tell me what to do that I could trust. And I didn't have that, you know? And so finally the day shows up when I'm supposed to go get the port put in. And I woke up that morning and I just knew I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to go. So I didn't go, didn't show up. And I thought, okay, I've made my decision. I'm just going to follow this path I'm on. Into the jungle, I'm going to trust God to lead me. Because, you know, that's what faith is, right? Faith is not just believing something. Faith is also action. Faith without works is dead. And so faith without action is dead too. And so I had to really step out in faith and trust that that number one, that God gave me this alternate path, and that two, he was going to see me through if I chose to go that way. And that was the toughest part. And you know, we do that a lot in life, don't we? We ask for something, we ask for an answer, and we get something, but then we don't have enough faith to walk it out. And we default back to the easy path, you know, the easy road that everybody's going down. But I stepped out into the unknown, totally trusting God to lead me, and with, you know, again, no map, right? No guide. It's just me and Jesus, basically. So I thought everything was good, but the cancer clinic was relentless. They were calling my house every day, right? Leaving messages. I'd come home and the lights blinking on the answering machine. Like, you know, we had the machine, and the little red lights blinking. And I'm like, oh. Boop. Hello, Mr. Wark. This is the cancer clinic. Blah, blah, blah. You missed your appointment. We're very concerned about your health. Please call your doctor immediately to reschedule. So kept getting messages like that. It was stressing me out. And then they finally send me a certified letter that I had to sign for. And I'm like, what is this about? Like, gonna sue me? Like, are they gonna arrest me or something? Like, you know, I didn't know. And it was just, you know, read the letter and they're like, you know, we're concerned about your health. Call your doctor immediately. And once I got that letter, they finally left me alone. And I was free to do what I wanted to do. And I found a naturopath who was the first person besides my mom to tell me I was doing the right thing. And that was huge for me. It's huge. And you know, along the way, the beautiful thing about when you're totally trusting God to lead you is he gives you these little signposts along the way to remind you. You know, you don't have daily reminders, right? Day to day, you're just operating on pure faith. But just these little reminders come into your life that say, you're on the right path, just keep going, I'm with you. And so I would get just random stuff would happen. You know, I told you about Jack LaLanne, obviously, the book, and then Jack LaLanne, and then the ecologist saying the weird stuff to me, and of course the sloppy Joe, I mean, how. And then I go on this men's retreat, and with my church, this, you know, weekend men's retreat, and I'm sitting there in the meeting, and I'm talking to another guy that went to a sort of like a sister church or whatever. He was the pastor, and I was like, yeah. It's like, yeah, you know, I was diagnosed with cancer, like, you know, a couple months ago, and I'm on a raw food diet right now, and I brought all my own food and stuff. And he was like, oh, yeah. He's like, I know somebody who does a raw food diet. Yeah, he's sitting right over there. I was like, what? Like, I've never even met a raw food diet person. Except for the weirdos in the support group. They didn't count. And so this guy is sitting just across the room, and I go introduce myself. Turns out his wife had Crohn's disease, and the doctors told her it was incurable, and it was just going to get worse and worse, and then eventually they'd have to cut her intestines out. And she read the same book I read and adopted a raw food diet, and her body healed. And I'm like, and they lived like 10 minutes away or whatever from my house. So I'm like, wow, this is great. So those kind of things kept happening. You know, just to confirm that I was going down the right path. And so if any of you are at that crossroads, I just want you to understand that you may feel alone, but you're not. Okay? You're not really alone. And if you're trusting God to lead you, He will continue to remind you and confirm that you're going the right way. And that is huge. So you have that to look forward to. But the unknown is scary, and I get that. Right? It's just scary. People are more scared of the unknown than they are of the known. That's why so many go with the suffering and the brutality of conventional cancer treatments. At least they know what's going to happen. The other thing that was concerning to me was, I didn't want to die a fool, right? I mean, my pride and my ego were involved here. I didn't want to be the cautionary tale, like, don't do what Chris did, right? Like, he squirted a bunch of coffee up his butt and then he died. So, didn't want to be that guy. And I had some very strong motivation. And I think that's really important, is finding the motivation that keeps you going every day. Because you're not going to have cheerleaders every day. And my wife loves me, we're still married, and we have a great relationship, and we've never been better. But at the time, she really just didn't know how to help me. I mean, she really thought I was making a mistake to such a large degree that she just was sort of paralyzed into inaction. Like, she just couldn't help. She didn't know what to do, and we had some conflict about what I was doing that time, and it made it difficult. We got through it. I tell you, one of the things that helped was the Jack LaLanne on TV and the oncologist, what he said to us. That really helped start to get her thinking differently, because she grew up in a very conventional, go to the doctor for everything kind of household. And as time went on, she slowly came around. And so I want to encourage you also that the people that think you're crazy eventually will think you're a genius. That's good. So you have that to look forward to. Like, when you get well, and everybody's like, oh, what did you do? Can we talk? And you're like, where were you when I needed some, a run to the store for some more carrots? So anyway, during that time, I found I told you I found a naturopathic, integrative, clinical nutritionist who helped me with supplement protocol, and was just an encouragement. Just somebody that believed that I was making the right decision was huge. That was the most valuable part of our relationship. And then he knew an integrative oncologist who I worked with, and he did vitamin C IV therapy for me and monitored my blood work and my scans, and he didn't put any pressure on me to do chemotherapy. And this was a man, another miracle, in my journey was that this man came out of retirement because he didn't like being retired. He was in his 70s. He had spent a lifetime treating cancer patients conventionally, and came back out of retirement and decided to try some new things, to try some integrative therapies, some other natural and non-toxic therapies, because he just knew the standard stuff wasn't working. He'd seen, who knows, hundreds, maybe thousands of patients that he had treated die in his career. And so he was very open and was sort of a voracious reader and learner. He was traveling to China to learn about Eastern medicine in his 70s. Like, what an amazing guy, right? And so I found this man. His name is Dr. Roy Page. He's now deceased, but he was just another incredible person on my support team, just to know that this guy also was rooting for me and believed in me and didn't think I was making a mistake. So I had my mom, and I had a naturopath, and I had an oncologist. And that was my team, right? That was it. And again, as good as that sounds, I was only seeing these, the two doctors like once a month. So it wasn't like every day I was getting encouragement from them, right? And that's where the motivation was really important. And another practitioner I saw asked me this question. She was a structural integration and Reiki practitioner, and she said, do you want to live? And I thought, in that split second, it was a terrifying question. It was a really scary question. Because no one had ever asked me if I wanted to live before. And I'd never asked myself that. And for a split second, which felt like an eternity, I was afraid that maybe secretly I didn't want to live. That maybe secretly I had a death wish. And that I was subconsciously sabotaging my life and my health. But in that moment, even though I didn't know if I wanted to live or die, I also realized, wait a minute, I can choose. I can make a choice. And I choose to live. I'm going to choose to live. So I said, yes, I want to live. Some of you may need to ask yourself that question. Because a lot of times in the cancer world, everybody's just so busy trying not to die. But they're not trying to live. Do you understand the difference? Right? There's a big difference between fully living and just not dying. And when you're making decisions to live, they're very different decisions than the I just don't want to die decisions. So I had that epiphany, and it really changed the way I thought about a lot of things. And it even helped when I was talking to other people, and I would just say, look, I'm doing what I'm doing because I want to live. That's why I made the decisions I've made. That's why I'm doing this. Because I want to live a long, healthy life. And I don't see that with the other. So during the process, I also very early on realized, well, what do I have to live for? The first thing was my parents. I'm an only child. And so the idea of my parents having to bury their only child, like that was heartbreaking to me. I just could not imagine it. And then my wife, she and I had been together 8 years, married for 2. I couldn't bear the thought of her burying me either. So I had those two. Those are my 2 reasons to live. Because number 1, do you want to live? If the answer is yes, then the second question is, why? What do you have to live for? If you're not sure, you need to figure it out pretty quick. Now, some cancer patients don't have a will to live. Like, they're ready to die, and it's okay. Sometimes they've lived a long life, and they feel like they've accomplished what they wanted to accomplish in the world, and they're satisfied with that, and they're okay with dying. Does anybody know the story of driving Miss Norma? Anybody? You can Google it. So Norma was diagnosed with cancer a little over a year ago. She was 91. And her doctor said, well, you're going to need, surgery and chemo and radiation. And she was like, forget that, I'm hitting the road. So she gets in an RV with her son and daughter-in-law and a poodle, I think. And they've traveled all around the U.S. on this giant adventure for the last year. And their social media page has like 500,000 followers or something crazy. But she's just living her life, enjoying her life, right? She said, didn't want to do treatment, right? It's like, no, I'm going to live and enjoy my life. And so they've done all this fun stuff, done all these things she's never done before and whatever. And it's such a beautiful example of someone who just chose life. She chose to live. And it's okay, like she didn't do juicing and coffee enemas, didn't do any of that, right? She just wanted to enjoy her life. And I think that's really important. So if you have cancer and you're okay with dying, then just enjoy your life. Don't do anything you don't want to do. It just doesn't make sense. Do what you want to do and enjoy your life. If you have cancer and you want to get well, then I want to encourage you to radically change everything and investigate, read and research and try to figure out, okay, what are the factors in my life that are contributing to my disease? And how can I change that? Because we know that between 70 to 95% of cancers are preventable because they're caused by diet and lifestyle, right? And so guess what? If there are multiple diet and lifestyle factors that cause cancer, we know, then guess what? Changing them can help your body heal. Because if you don't change them, they're still hurting you. What am I talking about? Talking about number one cause of cancer. Anyone want to guess? Let me hear it. Somebody say it loudly. Stress was a great answer. There it is. The number one cause of cancer is smoking. Smoking. It's cigarettes. It's tobacco, people. It's the single number one cause of cancer and cancer death. It's smoking. Okay? Number two is, it's not sugar. Almost there. We're dancing around it. It's not processed food or toxins, alcohol. Those are all factors. But the second leading cause of cancer, according to the National Cancer Institute, World Health Organization, like the major cancer research organizations, is obesity. It's obesity. No judgment if you're obese, okay? But you just need to know. Smoking's number one, obesity's number two. Well, how do we end up obese, right? Diet, okay? But being overweight increases your risk factors for a host of diseases and multiple types of cancer because it's an excess burden on your body. So, hey, if you're overweight, let's just get serious about getting the weight off, right? So those two are huge. And most people, like this whole room, most of you didn't guess correctly, right? But those are the two biggest risk factors and causes of cancer. It's our choices, right? Genetics account for less than 5% of cancers. Less than 5. Now, the part where genetics gets tricky is, well, my mom had breast cancer and then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it's genetic. No, what it is you have heredity, yes, but the reason you have breast cancer is because you ate the same diet and lived the same type lifestyle as your mom. You ate the standard American diet, the Western diet, okay? The Western diet is a major cancer promoter. Does everybody know that there's other countries besides the U.S.? It's easy to forget that living in the U.S. because it's so big, we kind of feel like we're the entire world. But there's other countries, and guess what? Other countries have much lower cancer rates. And the countries with the lowest cancer rates are the ones that are not westernized. So the highest cancer rates, Canada, U.S., the U.K., Australia, right? Western nations. The countries with the lowest cancer rates are what we used to call third world countries, right? Africa, the Middle East, China, South America. Cancer rates are way lower, way lower. And why is it? It's not genetic. You know, the breast cancer rate in Japan is 6 times lower. But when Japanese women migrate to the US and live in the US for decades, the rate of cancer among those women is the same as US American women or whatever. So it's our diet and lifestyle. Does pollution play a part? Environmental toxins? Absolutely. It does. But some of that we can't control. What we can control makes the biggest difference. Like I just said, smoking and obesity. It's huge. Those are the biggest contributors. So I'm trying to make a large point here, and that large point is your choices matter. But you know, the medical industry wants you to believe they don't. They want you to believe that nothing you did contributed to your situation, and therefore, nothing you can do will help. You are powerless. Just show up for your chemo, and we'll do the rest. And you go home, eat as many cheeseburgers and slices of pizza and scoops of ice cream as you want. Right? That's what they tell you. They tell you go home and eat whatever you want, and they're serving Cokes and candy bars in the cancer clinics. So the real tragedy is that there are a lot of good doctors in the cancer world, but they're trapped in a system that pays them really good money despite the results. And they're basically handcuffed. They're not allowed to be integrative. They're not allowed to innovate. They're not allowed to use their creative mind. They're forced into a very rigid system. They have 3 tools in their toolbox: surgery, radiation, and drugs. And that's it. And that's how they're trained. And they have no nutritional training. And so, there are good people and bad people in the world. There are bad doctors and there are good doctors, but it really doesn't matter because even the good and the bad ones, they only have a couple different options they can give you. And that's it. So if you're in that system, you're very limited. And I think the best doctors in the system are wishing and hoping that some miracle drug is invented that actually works for people, right? Right now, everybody's talking about immunotherapy, right? It's the new hope. And it's not working really well. Most cancer patients, it doesn't work for. There's a small percentage that it is actually working for. That's great. But we're still not telling people that they need to change their life. Now, let me be clear. I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad or blame you for your cancer. But we know from all the scientific research on the lowest cancer rates around the world, we know the Western diet contributes to cancer, we know environmental pollution is a factor, we know our choices matter, and so I took the position in my own healing journey that, you know what, maybe this is my fault. I just accepted it. Maybe this is my fault, and if so, if it's my fault, maybe I can do something about it. If I made this mess, maybe I can clean it up. If I caused this problem, maybe I can fix it, right? And that's actually empowering. It's not to blame you and make you feel like, you screwed up and you need to go feel sorry for yourself. It's to empower you that you can affect your future. Your choices today create your reality tomorrow. But you have to make good choices. And you have to have a reason to make good choices. Is everybody with me on that? Right? So you have knowledge first, and then you have motivation, and then you have action. Knowledge plus motivation plus action equals results. Sometimes a small change can produce big results. Small change, big results. But unfortunately, we've been conditioned to think by the pharmaceutical industry in our lifetimes, we've been conditioned to think a small pill will fix all our problems, right? And that's almost never the case. And a lot of us carry that mentality into the alternative health, and healing world. And we're looking for that one little thing, like, oh, isn't there like an herb I can take or something to cure my cancer in the rainforest? No. There isn't. Let's just put that to bed. Small changes can produce big results, but massive action always produces massive results. Massive action, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I did. I took massive action. I told you I went 100%, right? I changed everything in my life. I sort of spread my life on the table, so to speak, and looked at every component of my life to figure out what was wrong. And most of us don't do that, right? We don't want to think about what we're doing wrong. And so I looked at my diet, and I looked at my attitude, my emotions, I looked at stress, and then I looked at environmental toxins and environmental pollution. And one by one, I started making as many changes as I could, as fast as I could, to reinvent myself, right? Because I was trying to rebuild a new body and a new life. And I just realized after reading book after book that this wasn't a one change process. It was change everything process. Some of you may think that sounds intimidating. Don't be intimidated. You can do this. I'm not special. I'm a regular dude, okay? If I can change my life, you can change your life. It's not a big deal, okay? It's not a big deal. It is a big deal, really. But I don't want you to be intimidated by it. Somebody said stress earlier, and I want to touch on that because stress is so important. And I can actually make the case that stress is the number one cause of cancer. And here's why. Now, the two statistics I told you earlier, those are the official statistics from, giant cancer research institutions, okay? But now I'm going to tell you why I think stress is actually the root cause of all cancer and most chronic disease. And it goes like this. When you're stressed, well, first of all, most of us don't even know what stress is. We kind of know like it's a feeling. We don't really know what it is. So stress is all negative emotion. It's all negativity creates stress. So negative thoughts and emotions create stress in your mind and in your body. What are those negative thoughts? Envy, jealousy, anger, resentment, bitterness, unforgiveness, prejudice, and insecurity, self-hatred, shame, guilt. Okay, all of those negative emotions produce stress. And as we live our lives, we make mistakes that we feel guilty and shame about. People hurt us, and we carry bitterness and unforgiveness. We're conditioned to be prejudiced or envious or whatever. And so a lot of us have all of these negative emotions that are just swirling in our minds, right? On a daily basis. And then we've got the stresses of life. We have money stress and relationship problems. And sometimes they're extreme, right? It could be abuse. It could be a lawsuit. It could be losing your job. It could be the death of a loved one or multiple loved ones in a short period of time. And so we're going through life in a state of chronic stress from all this stuff, and then there are these catastrophic events that happen in our life. And at some point, for a lot of people, there's a tipping point where the stress overwhelms them. And when you're under stress, chronic daily stress, your body's pumping adrenaline and cortisol. And those two hormones, like I said earlier, suppress your immune system, and they promote inflammation. So if you're chronically stressed, because you're in an unhappy relationship, because your work is terrible, because you got money problems, you're living in a state of chronic immunosuppression and inflammation. And that's a problem, because you're skating on thin ice, and at some point, the ice gets thinner and thinner, and you're going to, right? Your immune system's going to bottom out, your body's going to become a place where cancer can thrive, and then all of a sudden you got something. You got a lesion, you got a lump or a bump or whatever, or a tumor. So the way that stress leads to cancer is like this. When we have problems, when we have all these little stressful issues and problems that we don't deal with, what we tend to do is we self-medicate. And how do we self-medicate? With tobacco, right? People smoke cigarettes when they're stressed, right? With food, people eat when they're stressed, because food is a medication. Anybody who's ever fasted? Anybody ever fasted? So fasting is very powerful. It's one of the most powerful and free therapies you can do for your body, because fasting regenerates your immune system in just 3 days on a water fast. But we medicate with food. And when you take food away, all of those emotions just come up. You realize, like, all of the bitterness and unforgiveness and stuff, it just comes up when you're fasting. And then you can deal with it, which is good. But we medicate with sex, we medicate with media, right? Just being a media addict, addicted to watching, 2 hours of sports every night or primetime dramas or whatever. And so we're doing all these things, even being a workaholic too. doing all these things to distract ourselves from our problems, right? That's how we self-medicate. And guess what? A lot of these self-medication behaviors are destructive behaviors. And that's how stress leads to cancer. That's how stress can, I can make this case that stress is the leading cause of all chronic disease and cancer. So you got to solve the stress problem first. Now, you heard the dinner bell. That means my time is almost up. Or maybe it is up. I'm not sure if that was the 5-minute warning or the time's up warning. Can somebody tell me back there? There's some little munchkins back there, doing stuff. But I can put a bow on this with stress, and this is the most important part of my talk. And the single most important thing you can do is deal with the stress in your life. You can't run away from it. You've got to stop self-medicating, because I've seen cancer patients do everything right and still not get well because they wouldn't address the stress. They wouldn't forgive. And forgiveness is the most powerful thing you can do to help yourself, is to forgive every person who has ever hurt you in life. To give them to God and say, I forgive them, they're all yours. And I'm asking you to bless them. That sounds hard, but it's not. And guess what? God knows your heart. He knows you don't want him to bless them. He knows you want a lightning bolt. But the fact that you ask God to bless someone who's hurt you, it opens up your heart in a way that lets him come in and heal it. I can't explain it, but that's just what happens. And so if you leave with one thing today, I hope you leave with, I need to go forgive every person who has ever hurt me, right? And when you forgive, it's a decision for life. It's not a feeling, it's a choice. And it's for life. So you're saying, God, I forgive them. I'm letting it go. I'm not holding it against them. They're all yours. And I'm asking you to bless them. And I'm done, right? And just give him your bitterness, your resentment, your anger. Just give it to God. And I promise you, you will feel so much different. Your emotions change after you make that decision. It's a really powerful thing. And it's the one thing missing in the health and healing world, in the cancer world. It's the one thing I see missing. Not that no one's talking about it, but that we're not talking about it enough, is forgiveness. So the forgiveness is a huge part of the stress puzzle, and the other part, which is smaller, is taking a really good look, a hard look at your life and just asking yourself, what am I stressed about? What do I need to change in my life to create a peaceful life instead of a stressful life? And so take some action, make a list. If there's people you need to get away from them. If your job is killing you, quit, right? Get out of there. No job is worth dying for, right? No job is worth death. And again, if you just sit down and treat your life like a business, right? And start redlining things that aren't working, it will make a massive, massive improvement in the whole healing journey for you. So, forgive. Can we do that? Okay. Thank you all very much. And I'll be around, so if anybody wants to talk, I'll be here all day. We can hang out and stuff. Thank you.
Thank you so much.